Prime Counselor Veltar stood before the great viewing window of the council chamber, watching the distant explosions that marked the death of another world. The Kelvin system burned in the darkness of space, its 3 billion inhabitants now. Serving a new master, the Hive Mind Consortium had claimed another prize. "How many ships did we lose this time?" Veltar asked without turning around. His aide, a young Corellian named Morzin, checked his datapad with shaking hands. 47 vessels, sir. The entire 3rd Defense Fleet. Morzin's voice cracked. They didn't even slow down the consortium ships. Our weapons barely scratched their hulls. Veltar closed his eyes. 47 ships meant over 10,000 souls. Good Corellians who had volunteered to defend their people, now dead or worse. The consortium didn't just kill their enemies. They changed them. They turned them into something else, something that served the Hive. The council chamber doors opened behind him. Veltar heard the soft footsteps of the other council members as they took their seats. These were the leaders of 17 worlds, the brightest minds of Corellian civilization. They had built a society based on cooperation, understanding, and peaceful trade. They had created art that moved hearts and science that improved lives. None of that mattered now. "Honored counselors," Veltar said as he turned to face them, "we have reached the end of our options. The consortium has taken 12 of our outer colonies. Our defense fleets cannot stop them. Our diplomatic missions have failed. They do not negotiate. They do not listen. They only consume." The council members looked tired. They had been meeting for weeks trying to find a solution that didn't exist. Counselor Mertha, the eldest among them, spoke first. "What do you propose, Veltar? We have tried everything our laws allow. We have followed every protocol. We have honored every treaty." "That is the problem," Veltar replied. "We are fighting an enemy that does not care about our laws. They do not honor treaties. They do not follow protocols. We need help from those who might understand such enemies." The chamber fell silent. Everyone knew what he meant. The galaxy was full of civilizations, but most were like the Corellians. They were peaceful, diplomatic, and reasonable. They solved problems through discussion and compromise. They had built their societies to avoid conflict, not to win it. But there were rumors. Stories from the outer rim. Tales of species that had not learned to be civilized. Worlds where beings still fought each other over resources and territory. The galactic community usually avoided such places. They were considered backward, dangerous, and unstable. "You want to call for outside help?" Counselor Demrick said slowly. "You want to broadcast a distress signal to unknown species." "I want to send a message to everyone who might listen," Veltar said. "We have exhausted our resources. We have lost 12 worlds and 3 full defense fleets. The consortium will reach our core worlds within 6 months. We need military assistance from anyone willing to provide it." The debate that followed lasted for hours. Some council members worried about the diplomatic implications. Others feared what kind of help they might receive. The Outer Rim was known for its violent species. Bringing such beings into Corellian space could create new problems. But as the discussion continued, the reality became clear. The consortium was not going to stop. They had already proven that conventional warfare could not defeat them. Their ships were stronger, their weapons more powerful, and their soldiers felt no fear or pain. They were a perfect enemy for an imperfect galaxy. Finally, Counselor Mertha called for a vote. All in favor of authorizing a galaxy-wide distress. Beacon? 15 hands rose. Only 2 abstained. The message took 3 days to craft. Every word was checked and rechecked by the diplomatic staff. They wanted to ensure proper courtesy while making the urgency clear. The final text followed all established protocols for interstellar communication. To all civilized species within communication range, the message began. The Corellian Confederacy faces extinction at the hands of an aggressive force known as the Hive Mind Consortium. We formally request military assistance in exchange for territorial concessions and favorable trade agreements. We offer full diplomatic recognition and mutual defense treaties to any civilization willing to aid us in this crisis. Please respond through proper diplomatic channels. Time is of critical importance. The message was transmitted on all standard frequencies, translated into 47 languages, and broadcast toward every known civilization in the galaxy. Then, the Corellians waited. The responses came within days. 42 civilizations answered with the exact same diplomatic formula. They expressed sympathy for the Corellian situation. They offered to accept refugees from threatened worlds. They requested detailed information about proposed territorial concessions and trade agreements. They wanted formal negotiations conducted through proper channels. All of them would require months of discussion before any action could be taken. The Corellians filed each response according to protocol and began preparing the paperwork for formal negotiations. It was what civilized species did. The 43rd response was different. It came from a system not found in any diplomatic database. The coordinates placed it on the very edge of the galaxy, in a region marked as unexplored space. The message itself was shockingly brief and violated several basic rules of interstellar communication. Received your SOS. Cavalry's coming. Hang tight. Terran Coalition Fleet Admiral Sarah Chen. The message included no formal greetings. It offered no diplomatic credentials. It did not request detailed information about the situation or propose negotiations. It simply stated that help was coming. Veltar stared at the message for a long time. Terran Coalition, he said to his aide. Do we have any records of this species? Morson checked the diplomatic archives. Nothing, sir. The system coordinates don't match any known civilization. The language patterns are unfamiliar. Even the name Sarah Chen doesn't follow any recognized naming conventions. But they said help is coming, Veltar said. No negotiations. No requests for information, just help. Within hours, the Corellian long-range sensors detected something impossible. A fleet of ships was approaching from the direction of the unknown system. They were moving faster than any known vessel could travel without tearing itself apart. The energy signatures were unlike anything in the galactic database. How many ships? Veltar asked as he watched the sensor displays. 43. Vessels, sir. But the size readings don't make sense. Some of them are larger than our space stations, and they're maintaining that impossible speed even as they approach our system. The ships were also ignoring every established space lane and territorial boundary. They cut straight through 3 different sovereign systems without stopping for customs checks or border control. The local authorities sent increasingly frantic messages demanding that the unknown fleet identify itself and submit to inspection. The fleet's response was simple and direct. Terran Coalition Fleet en route to emergency assistance mission. Do A. Not interfere. That was all. No apologies for the territorial violations. No offers to submit to inspection. No acknowledgement of local authority. The ships just kept coming, leaving a trail of confused diplomatic protests in their wake. As the fleet approached Corellian space, Veltar began to worry. The messages suggested that these Terrans did not understand or care about diplomatic protocol. They seemed to operate by different rules entirely, rules that might not include respect for Corellian sovereignty or customs. Sir, Morson said quietly, what if we made a mistake? What if these beings are as dangerous as the consortium? Veltar watched the approaching ships on his display. They looked strange, angular and aggressive in ways that Corellian vessels never were. Their weapon signatures suggested firepower that could devastate entire fleets. Their approach suggested beings who were accustomed to taking what they wanted by force. Then we are about to learn what happens when you ask for help from the darkness between the stars, Veltar said, and pray that our desperation has not doomed us all. The Terran fleet reached the edge of Corellian space exactly 72 hours after their first message. They did not slow down. They did not request permission to enter. They simply crossed the border as if it did not exist. Captain Mordoon of the Corellian border fleet received orders to intercept the unknown vessels and attempt first contact. As his ship approached the Terran formation, he activated all standard diplomatic protocols. He was prepared for a lengthy exchange of greetings, cultural information, and formal introductions. Instead, he received a message that would change everything he thought he knew about the galaxy. "This is Admiral Chen of the TCS Indomitable. We're here about your bug problem. Where are they?" No formal greetings, no cultural exchange, no diplomatic courtesy. Just a simple question that treated the greatest crisis in Corellian history like a minor pest control issue. Mordoon tried to explain the proper procedures for first contact between civilizations. He offered to begin cultural exchange protocols and arrange formal meetings with the Council. He suggested that Admiral Chen might want to review the legal frameworks governing military assistance between sovereign states. The response came back immediately. "Captain, we didn't come here to exchange recipes and discuss legal frameworks. We came here to kill the things that are eating your people. Point us toward the enemy and get out of our way." As Mordoon struggled to process this unprecedented directness, his sensors detected something that made his blood freeze. The consortium fleet had been detected approaching the Tiran system. They were moving to claim their 13th Corellian world. When he shared this information with the Terran fleet, their response was immediate and terrifying. "Copy that. We'll handle Tiran first, then work our way through their other positions. Try to keep up." The Terran ships accelerated toward the Tiran system at speeds that should have been impossible. They left the Corellian vessels far behind, racing toward a confrontation with an enemy that had destroyed everything sent against it. Veltar watched from the council chamber as the two fleets approached each other in the darkness of space. The consortium had never faced an enemy like these Terrans. The Corellians had never seen anyone willing to charge headfirst into certain death to help complete strangers. "What have we done?" whispered Counselor Mertha. "What we had to do," Veltar replied. "Now we see if our salvation comes with a price we can afford to pay." In the depths of space, two forces unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen prepared to meet in battle. The outcome would determine not just the fate of the Corellian Confederacy, but the future of civilized space itself. The Terrans had answered the call for help. Now everyone would learn what that really meant. Captain Mordoon had commanded border patrol ships for 15 years. He had conducted first contact with 7 different species. He knew every protocol, every courtesy, and every proper procedure for diplomatic introduction between civilizations. Nothing in his training had prepared him for Admiral Sarah Chen. The Terran fleet had cut through 3 sovereign systems like they owned the entire galaxy. Local authorities were sending panicked messages about territorial violations and unauthorized transit. The Galactic Trade Commission was threatening legal action. The Intersystem Court was preparing formal complaints. The Terrans ignored all of it. "Admiral Chen," Mordoon said carefully as his ship matched pace with the massive Terran vessel, "I appreciate your willingness to assist us, but there are certain protocols we must follow. First contact between our species requires cultural exchange, translation verification, and formal recognition ceremonies." The response came back in heavily accented Standard Galactic. "Captain, I don't know what half of those words mean, and I don't have time to learn. We detected your bug problem 6 hours ago. Every minute we spend talking, more of your people die. Where is the enemy?" Mordoon blinked. He had never heard anyone refer to the terrifying Hive Mind Consortium as a bug problem. The Consortium had destroyed entire civilizations. They had weapons that could crack moons and ships that regenerated damage faster than conventional weapons could inflict it. "The Consortium forces are currently occupying the Tiran system," he said. "But Admiral, you don't understand the scope of this threat. They have taken 12 of our worlds. Their ships are technologically superior to anything in this sector. Their soldiers cannot be reasoned with or defeated by conventional means." "Sounds like bugs to me," came the reply. Big, mean, space-eating bugs, but still bugs. We've dealt with worse. The casual confidence in that statement made Morden's head spin. What could possibly be worse than the consortium? What kind of enemies did these Terrans face in their own space that made the greatest threat in Corellian history seem ordinary? Admiral, perhaps we should coordinate our approach. The Corellian Navy has extensive intelligence on consortium tactics and capabilities. We could share battle plans and establish joint command structures. There was a pause. When Chen's voice came back, she sounded confused. Captain, are you asking me to have a committee meeting in the middle of a rescue mission? I'm suggesting proper military coordination between allied forces, Morden explained. Standard procedure requires... Captain, Chen interrupted, let me explain how Terrans handle rescue missions. Someone calls for help. We show up. We kill the bad guys. We go home. If you want to help, point us toward the enemy and stay out of our way. If you want to watch, try to keep up. If you want to have meetings, do it after we've solved your problem. The Terran fleet suddenly accelerated. Morden watched in amazement as the alien ships pushed past the theoretical maximum safe speed for in-system travel. Their hulls should have been torn apart by the gravitational stress. Their crews should have been crushed by the acceleration forces. Instead, they raced toward the Terran system like they were late for dinner. Morden ordered his ships to follow at maximum safe speed. It took them 4 hours to reach the system. The Terrans had arrived 3 hours earlier. What Morden found when he emerged from hyperspace defied everything he knew about warfare. The Terran system was in chaos. Consortium ships were scattered. Across 3 planets, their formations broken and confused. Several of their largest vessels were burning in high orbit. Others were fleeing toward the system's edge at full speed. In the middle of it all, Terran ships were conducting what could only be described as atmospheric combat. They were actually flying through planetary atmospheres, engaging consortium forces in the skies above populated cities. This is impossible, Morden whispered. No civilized species conducts warfare inside planetary atmospheres. The risk to civilian populations is unacceptable. His communications officer looked up from her console. Sir, we're receiving a transmission. From Admiral Chen. Admiral, what are you doing? Morden asked when the channel opened. You're fighting inside the atmosphere of an inhabited world. We're cleaning house, Chen replied. The background noise suggested she was in the middle of active combat. Your bugs set up shop in populated areas. If we stay in orbit and bombard them from space, we'll kill more civilians than enemies. So we came down here to do this the hard way. But the risk to your ships is our problem to worry about. We've got 3 cities cleared and the bugs are pulling back to defensive positions. Should have this wrapped up in a couple hours. A couple hours. The consortium had held the Terran system for 3 months. The Corellian Navy had lost 2 full battle groups trying to reclaim it. The Terrans were treating it like a minor cleanup. Operation. Admiral, Morden said carefully. The consortium forces on Terran include approximately 50,000 combat units and 12 capital ships. They have fortified positions throughout the major population centers. Our analysis suggests that retaking the system would require us to stop talking and start shooting, Chen interrupted. Captain, I know you mean well, but you're overthinking this. They're bugs. We kill bugs. It's not complicated. Through his tactical display, Morden watched Terran fighters streak through the atmosphere of Terran Prime. They moved in patterns that seemed random, but were devastatingly effective. Consortium positions that had withstood months of siege warfare were falling in minutes. The Terran weapons were unlike anything in the galactic database. Instead of the precise minimal damage systems preferred by civilized species, they seemed designed to eliminate targets as thoroughly as possible. When a Terran weapon hit a consortium position, there was nothing left to analyze. Sir, his weapons officer reported, the Terrans are requesting target identification for remaining consortium strongholds. Tell them that Consortium Command has established primary control centers in the capital city's government district, Mordun said, but warn them that there are approximately 2 million civilians in that area. The response came back immediately. Understood. Switching to precision urban warfare protocols. Keep your ships back. This is about to get loud. What followed was the most precise military operation Mordun had ever witnessed. Terran ground forces materialized throughout the capital city using some kind of teleportation technology. They moved with deadly efficiency, engaging consortium units while avoiding civilian areas with surgical precision. The strange part was their equipment. Every Terran soldier seemed to carry enough firepower to level a city block, but they used it with restraint that bordered on the artistic. They could destroy a consortium bunker without damaging the civilian shelter next to it. They could eliminate an enemy patrol without harming the refugees it was hurting. How are they doing that? Mordun's tactical officer asked in amazement. I don't know, Mordun admitted. Their weapons technology appears to be designed for maximum destruction, but they're using it with incredible precision. It's like watching someone perform surgery with a nuclear warhead. The battle for Tiran Prime lasted 6 hours. When it was over, the consortium forces had been completely eliminated. Not defeated, not driven back, but eliminated. There was no sign that they had ever occupied the system. The Terran fleet regrouped in high orbit. Admiral Chen's voice came over the communication system, casual as if she had just finished a routine training exercise. Terran system secured. Civilian casualties minimal. We're detecting consortium forces in the Kelvin system and 3 other locations. Which one do you want us to hit next? Mordun stared at his tactical display. In 6 hours, the Terrans had accomplished what the Corellian Navy couldn't do in 6 months. They had retaken a heavily fortified system, eliminated a superior enemy force, and rescued 2 million civilians, and they were asking which target to hit next. Admiral, Mordun said slowly, perhaps we should return to Corellian space and report to the Council. They will want to discuss strategy and coordinate our next moves. The pause that followed was so long that Mordun wondered if the communication system had failed. Captain, Chen finally said, are you telling me you want to stop in the middle of a rescue mission to have a meeting? I'm suggesting that we coordinate our strategy with the proper authorities before proceeding further. Another pause. This one was filled with background voices speaking in rapid Terran dialect. Captain, let me ask you something, Chen said. How many more of your worlds are under attack right now? 4 systems are currently occupied by consortium forces, Mordun admitted. And while we're flying back to have meetings with your council, how many more people are going to die in those systems? Mordun didn't want to answer that question. Here's what's going to happen, Chen continued. We're going to hit every consortium position in your space until they're all gone. If your council wants to discuss strategy, they can do it after their people are safe. If you want to help, keep up. If you want to file reports, do it later. The Terran fleet was already moving toward the Kelvin system. Mordun watched them go, realizing that he was witnessing something unprecedented in galactic history. These Terrans didn't fight wars. They didn't conduct campaigns. They didn't follow doctrine or strategy or protocol. They just fixed problems, quickly, efficiently, and with absolutely no regard for proper procedure. As his ships struggled to match the Terran fleet's impossible speed, Mordun began to understand why the galaxy had never encountered this species before. They probably spent most of their time trying to avoid the rest of civilized space. The rest of civilized space was too slow for them. Prime Counselor Veltar had been watching the tactical displays for 12 hours straight. What he was seeing made no sense according to every military principle he had ever learned. The Terrans had retaken 4 Corellian systems in 2 days. 2 days. The Corellian Navy had spent months trying to reclaim just one of those systems. The consortium forces that had seemed unstoppable were being swept aside like debris before a storm. But the methods the Terrans used horrified him almost as much as they impressed him. "Show me the Kelvin engagement again," Veltar said to his Aid. The tactical display filled with the record of the Terran assault on the Kelvin system. Morsun highlighted the critical moments as they played out in three-dimensional glory. "Here," Morsun said, pointing to the display. "The Terrans detect consortium defensive positions around the gas mining platform. Standard military doctrine would call for a siege to starve them out or precision bombardment to minimize infrastructure damage. And what did they do instead?" Veltar asked, though he already knew the answer. "They destroyed the entire platform," Morsun said quietly. "The mining complex, the orbital docks, the processing facilities, all of it, gone in 15 minutes. Veltar watched the recording of massive Terran weapons reducing a facility that had taken decades to build into expanding clouds of superheated gas. The destruction was so complete that forensic teams would need years to determine what had been destroyed. "They eliminated the enemy positions," Veltar said slowly, "but they also eliminated everything the enemy might have wanted to capture." "Yes, sir." When Admiral Chen was asked about the economic impact of losing the mining platform, her response was, Morsun checked his notes. Quote, "Better to have no platform than a platform full of brain-eating space bugs." End quote. The door to the council chamber opened. Captain Morden entered, looking like he hadn't slept in days. His uniform was wrinkled, and his expression suggested a man who had seen things that challenged his understanding of reality. "Captain," Veltar said, "please tell me you have better news from your coordination efforts with the Terran fleet." Morden took his seat with the careful movements of someone who was very tired. "Sir, I'm not sure the word coordination applies to what the Terrans are doing. They don't coordinate, they don't consult, they don't plan, they just act." "Explain," Veltar said. "Yesterday, we detected consortium forces establishing a forward base in the asteroid belt of the Vega system. Standard protocol would be to conduct reconnaissance, analyze their defensive capabilities, and develop an appropriate response strategy." "And the Terrans?" "They sent a single ship to eliminate the entire asteroid belt," Morden said. "The entire belt, sir. 17,000 asteroids, including the ones that had no consortium presence whatsoever." Veltar felt a headache beginning behind his eyes. "They destroyed an entire asteroid belt to eliminate one enemy base?" Admiral Chen's explanation was that asteroids make good hiding places for enemies, so it was better to remove the hiding places entirely. She also mentioned something about making sure the problem stays solved. The council chamber fell silent. Outside the great windows, the stars seemed dimmer than usual. Or perhaps it was just Veltar's mood. "How many consortium positions remain in our space?" he asked. "According to the latest reports, none," Morden said. "The Terrans finished their sweep of our territory 6 hours ago. Every consortium ship has been destroyed or driven from Corellian space." That should have been wonderful news. The greatest threat in Corellian history had been eliminated in less than a week. Their people were safe. Their worlds were free. So why did Veltar feel like they had traded one nightmare for another? "The Terrans have requested a meeting," Morden continued. "Admiral Chen wants to discuss what she calls cleanup operations and making sure this doesn't happen again." "Schedule the meeting for tomorrow morning," Veltar said. "Use conference room 7. Make sure we have proper refreshments prepared and—" "Sir," Morden interrupted gently, "the meeting is scheduled for 1 hour from now, aboard the Terran flagship. Admiral Chen said she doesn't have time for formal diplomatic proceedings." Of course she did. The Terrans seemed to have a positive allergy to anything resembling proper procedure. 1 hour later, Veltar found himself aboard a Terran warship that looked like it had been designed by someone who considered subtlety a character flaw. Everything was larger, louder, and more heavily armored than necessary. The corridors were wide enough to drive vehicles through. The weapons displays suggested enough firepower to sterilize small moons. Admiral Chen met them in what she called a briefing room, but which looked more like a military command center. She was a compact woman with steel gray hair and the kind of steady gaze that suggested she had seen terrible things and decided to do something about them. "Counselor Veltar," she said, extending a hand in what Veltar recognized as a Terran greeting gesture. "Thank you for coming. We need to talk about next steps." Veltar accepted the handshake, noting that Chen's grip could probably crush steel. "Admiral, on behalf of the Corellian people, I want to express our gratitude for your assistance. Your intervention saved countless lives." "You're welcome," Chen said simply. "Now let's talk about making sure this doesn't happen again." She activated a holographic display showing the local sector of the galaxy. Red markers indicated former consortium positions. Green markers showed current Terran fleet locations. The display was covered with tactical information that made Veltar's head spin. "Here's the situation," Chen said. "We've eliminated the consortium forces in your space, but that was just the local infestation. Intelligence gathered from their command centers indicates a much larger problem." The display shifted to show the broader galactic region. Veltar's blood went cold as he saw the scope of what Chen was revealing. "The consortium has been planning a coordinated assault on 17 different civilizations," Chen continued. "Your people were just the first target. They intended to use your biomass and resources to fuel expansion into the galactic core." 17 civilizations, Veltar whispered. "Billions of lives." "Gets worse," Chen said grimly. "They've already placed infiltrators in several governments. Sleeper agents in positions of authority waiting for activation signals. Some of the civilizations that refuse to help you, they're already compromised." The implications hit Veltar like a physical blow. The galactic community's careful diplomatic responses hadn't been the result of bureaucratic slowness. Some of them had been deliberate sabotage by consortium agents. "What do you propose we do about this?" Veltar asked. Chen's smile was not reassuring. "We're going to clean house, all of it. Every consortium position, every infiltrator, every trace of this infection gets burned out of civilized space." "But that would require operations in dozens of sovereign systems," Veltar said. "The diplomatic complications alone would take years to resolve. Each government would need to be contacted, evidence would need to be presented, formal requests would need to be filed." "Counselor," Chen interrupted, "how long do you think those 17 civilizations have before the consortium activates their sleeper agents and launches their coordinated assault?" Veltar consulted the tactical data on his personal display. "Based on the intelligence you've gathered, perhaps 6 months." "Right. And how long would it take to get permission from 17 different governments to conduct counter-infiltration operations in their territories?" "Following proper diplomatic protocols, approximately 2 years, assuming optimal cooperation from all parties." Chen nodded. "That's what I thought. So here's what we're going to do instead. We're going to save those 17 civilizations whether they want us to or not. We'll ask permission later." The casual way she said it made Veltar's diplomatic training scream in protest. "Admiral, you're talking about violating the sovereignty of dozens of worlds. The legal ramifications would be irrelevant if everyone's dead or converted into consortium drones," Chen finished. "Counselor, I know you mean well, but there's a time for diplomacy and there's a time for action. The time for diplomacy ended when these bugs decided to start eating civilizations." Veltar tried a different approach. "What if we informed the Galactic Council? They could coordinate a proper response that respects everyone's territorial rights." The look Chen gave him suggested she thought he might be suffering from some kind of mental illness. "Let me understand this," she said slowly. "You want to form a committee to discuss the proper way to ask permission to stop genocidal space parasites from eating the galaxy. I want to follow established legal procedures for interstellar cooperation," Veltar said. "And while your committee is meeting, how many more people die?" It was the same question Captain Mordoon had been asked. The same question that cut through all diplomatic niceties and reached the heart of the matter. "The Galactic Council has procedures for emergency situations," Veltar said weakly. How fast? Chen asked. Fast enough, Veltar said. But even, he didn't believe it. Chen activated another display showing the consortium's infiltration network. Here's what we found in the computers we captured. Sleeper agents in the governments of 12 different worlds, some of them in very high positions, some of them probably in your galactic council. The display showed names, faces, and positions. Veltar recognized several of them, high-ranking officials in major civilizations, people he had worked with, negotiated with, trusted. You're telling me that the very people we would ask for help might be working for the enemy, Veltar said. I'm telling you that we can't afford to find out the slow way, Chen replied. So we're going to do this the fast way, my way. Which is? Chen's smile was sharp enough to cut steel. We're going to visit every compromised system and remove the infection, surgically if possible, explosively if necessary. And if the local governments object, they can file a complaint after we've saved their people. Veltar stared at the tactical displays, trying to process what he was being told. The Terrans were planning to conduct military operations across dozens of systems without permission, authorization, or legal justification. They were going to violate every law of interstellar relations, and they were probably right to do it. How can I help? Veltar heard himself say. Chen's expression softened slightly. You can make sure your people understand what's coming, and you can help us identify which of your allies might actually be allies. As Veltar prepared to leave the Terran flagship, he realized that he was about to become an accessory to the largest violation of galactic law in recorded history. He was also about to help save billions of lives. Sometimes, he reflected, doing the right thing was more important than doing things right. The Terran operation to cleanse 17 star systems began at exactly 0800 Galactic Standard Time on a Tuesday. By Thursday evening, the diplomatic community was in complete chaos. Prime Counselor Veltar sat in his office, trying to process the flood of angry messages pouring in from across the galaxy. Government officials demanding explanations, legal authorities threatening prosecution, trade commissions filing formal complaints, all because the Terrans had done exactly what they said they would do. Sir, Morsun said, as he entered with another stack of diplomatic protests. We've received formal objections from 37 different civilizations. They're demanding that we recall the Terran fleet and submit to interstellar arbitration. What's the status of the Terran operations? Veltar asked. They've completed counter-infiltration procedures in 9 systems so far, Morsun reported. The results are comprehensive. Veltar had learned that when his aide used the word comprehensive regarding Terran operations, it meant something had been eliminated so thoroughly that investigation teams would need archaeological equipment to figure out what had happened. Show me the Altair incident, Veltar said. The tactical display filled with the record of the Terran operation in the Altair system. It had been their third target, a peaceful trading hub with a government that prided itself on diplomatic sophistication. The Altarians had responded to the Terran arrival with a masterpiece of bureaucratic procedure. They demanded that the Terrans submit to customs inspection. They required formal diplomatic credentials. They insisted on following established protocols for foreign military vessels in sovereign space. The Terrans had listened to all of this, with the patience of adults humoring children. Then Admiral Chen had explained that they were there to remove consortium infiltrators from the Altarian government. The Altarian response had been predictably outraged. They demanded evidence. They required formal accusations to be filed through proper legal channels. They insisted that any investigation must be conducted by Altarian authorities according to Altarian law. And how did the Terrans respond? Veltar asked, though he already knew. Admiral Chen informed them that they could either cooperate with Terran security screening or watch their government get screened the hard way, Morsun said. The Altarians chose to file legal objections. The display showed what happened next. Terran specialists had materialized throughout the Altarian capital using their mysterious teleportation technology. They had conducted what they called aggressive security screening on every government official above a certain rank. The screening process involved devices that Veltar didn't understand, but which apparently could detect consortium neural implants with perfect accuracy. The screened officials were divided into two groups: uninfected government workers and consortium infiltrators. The infiltrators were eliminated immediately, not captured, not detained for questioning, not processed through legal systems. Simply eliminated with the kind of thorough efficiency that made Veltar's diplomatic training weep. How many consortium agents did they find in the Altarian government? Veltar asked. 47, Morsun said quietly. Including the Deputy Prime, Minister and the Chief of Intelligence. 47 hidden enemies in a government that had seemed completely normal. Infiltrators who had been positioned to cripple Altarian defenses when the consortium launched their coordinated assault. The Altarians were now sending messages of grudging gratitude mixed with formal protests about violation of sovereignty. They were alive and free, but their legal sensibilities had been deeply wounded. "Sir," Morsun continued, "we're also receiving reports from the Vegan Collective. They're less happy than the Altarians." The Vegan system had been different. When the Terrans arrived and announced their intention to screen for infiltrators, the Vegan government had demanded a formal hearing before the Galactic Court of Justice. They had filed injunctions. They had threatened to declare the Terran fleet an invading force. The Terrans had responded by conducting their screening operation anyway. "The Vegans are claiming the Terrans violated their constitutional rights," Morsun said. "They want the Terrans arrested and tried for crimes against galactic law." "How many infiltrators did the Terrans find?" Veltar asked. 134, Morsun replied, including the Chief Justice who was demanding the formal hearing. Veltar rubbed his temples. The Terrans had found consortium agents in positions where they could have paralyzed the Vegan legal system, destroyed their defensive capabilities, and delivered their entire population to the enemy. The Vegans should have been grateful. Instead, they were demanding that their saviors be prosecuted for saving them. "What's Admiral Chen's response to these complaints?" Veltar asked. Morsun checked his files. Quote, "They can file all the complaints they want. Live people can always file complaints. Dead people can't." End quote. The door chimed. Captain Morden entered, carrying a data pad that he handled like it contained dangerous explosives. "Sir," he said carefully, "we've received a priority message from the Galactic Council. They're demanding an immediate conference to discuss the Terran situation." "What kind of conference?" Veltar asked. "The kind where they formally condemn our alliance with the Terrans and demand that we cooperate with their arrest," Morden said. The message was signed by representatives from 43 member civilizations. Veltar stared out his window at the stars. Somewhere out there, the Terrans were continuing their impossible mission. They were violating laws, offending sensibilities, and ignoring protests while methodically saving civilizations that didn't want to be saved in such an undignified manner. "How many systems have they cleansed so far?" he asked. 11, Morden reported. 6 more to go. They estimate completion within 48 hours. And casualties? Among the infiltrators, 100%. Among innocent civilians, 0. That was the thing that made all the diplomatic complaints seem petty. The Terrans were conducting surgical removal of a cancer that had spread throughout galactic civilization. They were saving billions of lives. And they were doing it without harming a single innocent person. But they were doing it without permission, without legal authority, and without regard for proper procedure. "Sir," Morsun said quietly, "there's something else. We've been analyzing the intelligence the Terrans gathered from consortium computers. The scope of their infiltration was even worse than we thought. The display filled with a network diagram that made Veltar's blood freeze. The consortium hadn't just been planning to attack 17 civilizations. They had been preparing to convert the entire galactic core into a resource base for expansion beyond the galaxy itself. They were planning to consume everything, Veltar whispered. Every world, every species, every trace of civilization. Yes, sir. And according to the timeline we recovered, the coordinated assault was scheduled to begin in 3 months. Not 6 months, as we originally estimated. 3 months. If the Terrans had followed proper diplomatic procedures, if they had waited for legal authorization and formal permissions, the galaxy would have been doomed. Billions would have died while lawyers debated jurisdiction. The Galactic Council needs to see this intelligence, Veltar said. They refuse to examine evidence gathered through illegal operations, Morden said. They claim it's inadmissible under interstellar law. Veltar almost laughed. The galaxy was about to learn that it had been saved by beings who didn't care about interstellar law, and the representatives of civilized society were more concerned about legal procedures than the evidence of their near extinction. Draft a message to the Council, Veltar said. Tell them that the Corellian Confederacy formally endorses Terran operations against the consortium threat. Tell them that we consider the Terrans to be heroes, not criminals. Sir, Mordoon said, carefully, that message will probably result in our expulsion from the Galactic Council. Captain, if the Council is more interested in prosecuting our saviors than understanding the threat they eliminated, then perhaps we don't belong in such an organization. As his subordinates prepared the message that would probably end Corellian membership in galactic civilization, Veltar thought about Admiral Chen and her impossible fleet. They had answered a desperate call for help from complete strangers. They had fought battles they had no obligation to fight. They had saved people who now wanted to arrest them. And when it was all over, they would probably just go home and wait for the next time someone needed their particular brand of salvation. The galaxy didn't deserve the Terrans, but it needed them more than it could possibly understand. The communication system chimed with an incoming message. It was from Admiral Chen, transmitted from somewhere in the Centauri system, where they were conducting their final cleansing operation. Counselor Veltar, this is Admiral Chen. We're wrapping up operations ahead of schedule. All 17 target systems have been cleansed of consortium infiltration. We'll be departing your sector within 12 hours. Admiral, Veltar said quickly, there are serious diplomatic complications arising from your operations. Several governments are demanding legal action. Perhaps you should remain in Corellian space until we can resolve... Counselor, Chen interrupted gently. We didn't come here to win popularity contests. We came here to stop genocidal space parasites from eating the galaxy. Mission accomplished. But the political ramifications are your problem to deal with now. We've done our part. The bad guys are gone, the good guys are safe, and the galaxy can go back to having committee meetings about proper procedures. The connection ended. 12 hours later, the Terran fleet departed Corellian space as quietly as they had arrived. They left behind 17 cleansed star systems, several billion grateful but confused citizens, and a diplomatic crisis that would take decades to resolve. They also left behind the certain knowledge that somewhere in the darkness between the stars there were guardians watching, guardians who didn't care about laws or procedures or proper protocol, guardians who only cared about results. 6 months after the Terrans departed, Prime Counselor Veltar stood before the Galactic Council for what would probably be the last time as a member. The great assembly hall buzzed with the voices of representatives from 200 civilizations, all of them eager to discuss the Terran problem. The irony was not lost on him. The galaxy's greatest crisis had been resolved in less than a week, but they were still debating it half a year later. The chair recognizes the representative from the Corellian Confederacy, announced Council Speaker Jorvash, a tall, elegant being whose species had perfected the art of saying nothing important with great dignity. Veltar rose from his seat, looking out at the assembled representatives. Many of them owed their lives to the Terrans. Many others were angry that such an important matter had been resolved without their input. A few seemed confused about why they were even having this discussion. "Honored colleagues," Veltar began, "we are here to discuss the actions of the Terran Coalition in what has become known as the Consortium Crisis. I have been asked to provide testimony regarding their operations in our space." "You mean their illegal military operations conducted without authorization from legitimate governing bodies?" interrupted Representative Kolvar of the Altarian. Trade Federation. Veltar noted that Kolvar's predecessor had been revealed as a consortium infiltrator and eliminated by Terran security forces. Kolvar was alive to make his complaint specifically because the Terrans had saved his civilization. "I mean their successful elimination of an existential threat to galactic civilization," Veltar replied calmly. "An operation that saved an estimated 47 billion lives across 17 star systems." The chamber erupted in arguments. Representatives shouted about sovereignty violations, illegal military actions, and the dangerous precedent of allowing unknown species to operate outside established law. Others countered with statistics about lives saved and civilizations preserved. Speaker Jorvash called for order. "The Council will hear testimony in an orderly fashion. Representative Veltar, please describe the initial Terran intervention in Corellian space." Veltar activated the holographic display at the center of the chamber. It showed the tactical situation as it had existed during the crisis. 12 Corellian worlds under consortium occupation, defense fleets destroyed, millions of civilians converted into consortium drones. "The situation was hopeless," Veltar said simply. "Our military forces had been defeated. Our diplomatic appeals had been ignored or delayed by bureaucratic procedures. We were facing extinction as a species. So you chose to violate established protocols for interstellar assistance," Representative Morketh of the Vegan Collective said accusingly. "We chose to survive," Veltar replied. "We sent a distress call to anyone who might help us. The Terrans were the only ones who answered with action instead of paperwork." The display shifted to show the Terran intervention. The impossible speed of their ships, the devastating efficiency of their weapons, the complete elimination of consortium forces in less than a week. "They didn't just help us," Veltar continued. "They discovered that the consortium threat was far greater than anyone realized. They found evidence of infiltration throughout galactic civilization. They identified a coordinated assault that would have consumed every inhabited world in the core systems. Evidence gathered through illegal operations," Representative Zextar of the Judicial Council pointed out. "Evidence that cannot be admitted in any legitimate legal proceeding." Veltar stared at the judicial representative. "Representative Zextar, your predecessor was identified as a consortium infiltrator. The Terrans eliminated him along with 36 other infiltrators in your government. You hold your position today because they violated your legal procedures." The chamber fell silent. It was a truth that many representatives didn't want to acknowledge. They owed their lives, their positions, and their civilizations to beings who had ignored every law they held sacred. "The question before this council," Veltar continued, "is not whether the Terrans followed proper procedures. The question is whether we can create procedures that are capable of responding to existential threats." "What do you mean?" Speaker Jorvash asked. Veltar activated another display. This one showed the timeline of the consortium crisis as it had actually unfolded, compared to how it would have proceeded through normal diplomatic channels. "If we had followed established procedures," Veltar said, "the first diplomatic negotiations would have begun approximately 8 months after my initial distress call. The consortium's coordinated assault was scheduled to begin 6 months after my call. By the time our first committee meeting convened to discuss the crisis, every representative in this chamber would have been dead or converted into consortium drones. The implications hung in the air like a toxic cloud. The representatives began to understand that they were debating the actions of the only reason they were still alive to debate anything. The Terrans saved us from a threat we didn't even know. existed, Veltar said. They did it quickly, efficiently, and without asking for anything in return. They violated our laws, ignored our procedures, and offended our sensibilities. And they did it because our laws, procedures, and sensibilities were inadequate to address the reality we faced. Representative Kolvar stood up. But if we allow this precedent to stand, any species with superior military capability could justify any action by claiming it was for the greater good. The rule of law would become meaningless. Representative Kolvar, Veltar said quietly, the rule of law was already meaningless. The consortium had infiltrated our governments, corrupted our institutions, and prepared to eliminate our civilizations. Our laws protected our enemies better than they protected us. The debate continued for hours. Representatives argued about sovereignty, legal precedent, and the importance of civilized behavior. They discussed the need for proper procedures, formal authorizations, and respect for established authority. None of them mentioned that they were having this debate in a chamber that would have been empty if the Terrans had followed their advice. Finally, Speaker Jorvash called for a formal vote on the resolution condemning Terran actions and demanding their prosecution for violations of interstellar law. The vote was close. Closer than Veltar had expected. 103 votes in favor, 97 against. The resolution passes, Jorvash announced. The Galactic Council formally condemns the illegal military actions of the Terran Coalition and demands their surrender to proper legal authorities. Veltar rose from his seat one final time. Speaker Jorvash, the Karelian Confederacy withdraws from this council effective immediately. We choose to stand with those who saved us rather than those who would prosecute our saviors. The chamber erupted in chaos as Veltar walked toward the exit. Behind him, he could hear other representatives rising to speak. Some were expressing outrage at his decision. Others were announcing their own withdrawals from the council. By the time he reached his ship, 17 civilizations had withdrawn from the Galactic Council in protest of the resolution. 3 months later, Veltar received a message from Admiral Chen. It was transmitted from the edge of Terran space, where the human fleet had returned to whatever they did when they weren't saving civilizations. Counselor Veltar, the message began, we heard about the council vote. Sorry about the diplomatic complications, but we figured you could handle the political stuff better than we could handle letting 47 billion people get eaten by space bugs. The message continued with typical Terran directness. We're attaching coordinates for a communication relay in neutral space. If you ever need help with something that your committees can't handle, send us a message. We'll see what we can do. Also, the message concluded, tell your people that the galaxy is a dangerous place. There are worse things than the consortium out there. If they want to stay safe, they need to get better at dealing with threats that don't follow the rules. We can't always be around to clean up the mess. The message ended with coordinates for the communication relay and a simple signature. Stay safe. Admiral Sarah Chen, Terran Coalition. Veltar stared at the message for a long time. The Terrans had saved the galaxy, endured condemnation from the very people they had rescued, and then offered to help again if needed. They didn't want territory, resources, or recognition. They just wanted civilized space to be able to defend itself. He drafted a response to Admiral Chen, thanking her and her people for their sacrifice. He assured her that the civilizations that had withdrawn from the council were working to create new institutions that could respond to real threats with real solutions. He also included a personal note. Admiral, you asked us to tell our people that the galaxy is dangerous. I will do that. But I will also tell them that somewhere in the darkness between the stars, there are guardians watching. Guardians who come when called, fight when needed, and ask for nothing in return except that we try to be worthy of their protection. The response came back within hours. It was even briefer than Chen's usual messages. Counselor, we're not guardians. We're just neighbors who don't like bullies. Take care of yourselves. Chen, As Veltar prepared to return to Corellian space, he reflected on the strangest 6 months of his diplomatic career. The galaxy had been saved by beings who didn't understand diplomacy, didn't respect sovereignty, and didn't follow rules. The same beings who had taught civilized space the most important lesson it had ever learned. Sometimes the only way to preserve civilization is to act without civilized restraint. Somewhere in the outer rim, the Terrans were probably preparing for the next crisis that would require their particular talents. They would come when called, fight when needed, and disappear when the job was done. And the galaxy would be safer for their existence, even if it never learned to appreciate their methods. Years later, when historians wrote about the consortium crisis, they would struggle to categorize the Terran intervention. It didn't fit any established model of interstellar relations. It violated every principle of civilized warfare. It ignored every law of diplomatic conduct. It had also saved everything worth saving. The final entry in the official record was written by Veltar himself in his capacity as the first president of the Free Systems Alliance, the organization formed by the civilizations that had withdrawn from the Galactic Council. The Terrans showed us that the greatest act of civilization is knowing when to abandon civilized behavior. They taught us that rules exist to protect the innocent, and when rules fail in that purpose, they become obstacles to justice rather than instruments of it. We condemn their methods. We celebrate their results. We pray we never need them again. We hope they will come if we do. In a galaxy full of civilized beings who debate endlessly about the proper way to do things, the Terrans are the uncivilized beings who simply do what needs to be done. May the stars preserve them. May we never deserve them. May they always answer when called. The record ended with a simple addendum. Communication relay coordinates attached for emergency use only. In the years that followed, the relay was activated 7 times. Each time, the Terrans came. Each time, they fixed the problem with methods that horrified civilized observers and results that saved civilized lives. Each time, they went home without asking for anything except that the galaxy try to be better prepared for the next crisis. The galaxy was learning. Slowly, reluctantly, and with much complaining about the violation of proper procedures, but learning nonetheless. And somewhere in the darkness between the stars, the Terrans waited patiently for the next time someone would need their help. They were ready.